18-year-old Joshua Maddux, missing since 2008, is found dead in a chimney in 2015, and it was ruled an accident. Circumstances would beg to differ. Hi all, this is my first time making a post like this, so please excuse me if I messed up the format or did something wrong. I recently came across a person on Charlie Project that I can't get out of my head. The circumstances around his death make me very sad, and while losing myself in the rabbit hole yesterday, I came across some things that I just have to discuss with someone. I was researching resolved cases yesterday, and I came across Joshua Maddux. Joshua was a smart, funny, and easygoing 18-year-old who was last seen May 8, 2008, in his hometown of Woodland Park, Colorado. He told his dad that he was going for a walk. He was reported missing, and in August 2015, his remains were discovered. They were found in the chimney of an abandoned cabin only 2 blocks from his dad's home. The cabin had been abandoned for 10 years according to the owner, and the owner would check in every now and then and did notice a smell, but figured it was just some dead rats. He did not think of checking the fireplace because there was a large piece of furniture blocking the entrance to it. It was during the demolishing of the cabin in 2015 that Joshua was found. Most of the articles I've read theorized that he tried to shimmy down the chimney to get inside the cabin, and it was left at that. The coroner did not know what to rule it, so he went with accidental. There are a few circumstances, though, that really made me question this. The biggest one I will leave for last. The first few odd things are that some of Joshua's clothing was found inside the cabin, and he was found wearing only a ribbed thermal shirt. The rest of his clothes were outside the fireplace inside the cabin. You're telling me that he decided to enter a chimney wearing only a shirt and no underwear or pants? Does this not make the theory that he entered from the top of the chimney to gain access to the cabin questionable? He was obviously already inside the cabin. There was also rebar installed on top of the chimney to stop animals from coming through that would have made it nearly impossible for him to enter at the top. He was found in fetal position in the chimney. All these things do is make me question the circumstances. But it wasn't until my reading I stumbled upon a Reddit post from a year ago in Ask Reddit that really gave me a horrible feeling. The post was about people who have known serial killers and how you felt after you found out. I don't know if it's okay to link to posts from other users, so I'll copy and paste it here without the poster's name. I went to high school with this skinny dorky hippie named Andy, who played guitar in a band. I was never good friends with him or anything, but a year or so after I graduated, one of my good friends, Josh, started hanging out with him and then went missing. Last I heard, Andy was telling another friend, yeah, me and Josh have been spending a lot of time together and we're planning a trip to New Mexico. Didn't really think anything of it until somebody showed me these articles. Turns out that in addition to becoming a lot scarier looking, Andy is indeed headed down to New Mexico, where he found himself shooting the shit with the caretaker of a disabled guy and got invited over to their apartment. Caretaker gets in the shower, and when he comes back out, the disabled guy is stabbed to death and Andy is gone. When Andy got arrested, he also claimed to have killed a woman in Taos and stuffed her body in a barrel. The cops had indeed found a woman stuffed in a barrel in Taos, but already had somebody in custody for it and decided to stick with that guy instead. Years later, I found out that the caretaker had died in a bar fight, and without him, the cops didn't have much in the way of evidence somehow, so the case against Andy was dropped too. And several of us went to the cops saying, yo, Josh went missing, was last seen with Andy, who's a murderer, maybe you should check that out. Despite a fair amount of pestering, nothing ever really came of it, and by nothing I mean that the police mostly didn't even return our calls, and once accidentally canceled the bulletin on Josh because, quote, he's alive and well and living in the next town over, unquote. He wasn't. He was actually in the chimney of an abandoned cabin like 2 blocks from his parents' house. The coroner said the body had been there for about 7 years and ruled the death accidental, concluding that Josh had probably climbed down the chimney in an attempt to break into the house and gotten stuck. Which, given the age of the corpse, doesn't seem overtly ridiculous. Except for the fact that, in addition to Josh having last been seen with Andy immediately before his stabbing spree, people called in to report having heard rumors that Andy was bragging about having, quote, put Josh in a hole, unquote. And the fact that the owner of the cabin says it would have been impossible to access the chimney from above because he'd installed a heavy steel grate under the top layer of bricks to keep out raccoons and whatnot. The coroner said he never saw the grate, so maybe it rusted away. The owner pointed out that this was because they had only found Josh's body while in the process of demolishing the cabin, and that the grate had been hauled off to the junkyard with the other scrap metal. Or the fact that somebody had ripped a heavy bar off the wall in the kitchen and propped it against the fireplace. Or the fact that Josh's stuff was already inside the cabin, meaning A, he'd already broken in and would have had to lock himself out to have to go for the chimney, and B, he might have noticed that either the flue or the big bar would have prevented him from getting in through the fireplace. Or the fact that when he was found, Josh's knees were above his head, which sounds to me like he would have had to go in head first. Disclaimer, not an expert at fucking all. Or maybe the fact that Josh was barefoot and naked from the waist down. This is just my opinion, but I don't care who you are. You don't try to climb headfirst into a chimney via a hole rusted through a metal grate with your dick hanging out. But the most ridiculous part for me is this quote from the coroner at the end of the last article I linked to. "I know it's not a natural death, and I'm confident it's not suicide," he said. "My other options are an accidental death, homicide, and undetermined cause of death. It is frustrating we can't pin it down." So, your options are accidental, homicide, and undetermined, but you just can't seem to pin it down? You're telling me it's almost as though you were unable to determine the cause of death? Well, in that case, everybody knows that accidental is the only way to go. Look, I get that they didn't find enough evidence to arrest Andy or anyone else, but these motherfuckers went ahead and demolished the cabin despite all this. Josh's body was cremated. As far as I can tell, nobody even bothered to call Andy to ask if he knew anything. By the way, from what I hear, Andy's still out and about doing his thing when he's not in the mental hospital. It's not that I want somebody to blame. I'm not trying to throw a tantrum because give me answers. All I'm saying is, I wish that they had done some police shit. Open an investigation. Try to track down some leads. Interview some of the folks who have been calling in tips for the last 7 years. Maybe check for some semen or something. I don't know. Don't just say accidental and dust your hands and call it a day. Anywho, sorry for the rant, guys. Had a little whiskey. Felt like I had to vent. But yeah, that shit frustrates me. The person that this poster was talking about is Andrew Richard Newman. Now, I can't find much about Andrew on the internet. The only thing I could find besides those articles is this arrest report from 2015. It has recently been brought to my attention that there are multiple arrest reports for Andrew with mugshots that include charges such as assault on a police officer, disorderly intoxication, grand theft, and battery as recent as this past month and going back last year to 2012. I can almost, and I say almost, understand why tips were not taken seriously years ago when the connection between he and Joshua were made by people who knew them, but now it needs to be looked into more. I guess with all of this, it gives me the gut feeling that foul play was involved with Joshua's death, and if this Reddit post is to be believed, then there is a good chance that Andrew had something to do with it. I know that there is very little chance of that being confirmed now, but it gives me a horrendous feeling knowing that his death is being taken as an accident caused by himself, and he will never have true justice. He died alone in that chimney, and I don't know how long he was conscious for, but he didn't deserve that. What do you all think about this case? Does it bother someone else like it bothers me? Is there anything that can be done now? Edit. Thank you all for the overwhelming support of this post. I didn't expect this, and I'm so incredibly glad that there are so many people today and tonight thinking about Josh and digging deeper into this horrible thing that happened. I have learned things that I didn't know about this case from you guys. Each and every one who posts here is an important part of this. Comments. Speak to the media, or write to state or U.S. representative expressing your concerns about how the case has been handled or not handled. You make an excellent argument, but seems like evidence might be circumstantial at best. However, if this was my family member, I'd want to feel satisfied with the investigation, and there was really no investigation on this untimely death. I've read articles about chimney sweeps getting stuck, and the fetal position and legs above head description sounds like a position that you would expect to find someone in that has become stuck in a chimney. A good visualization I've heard for this is in the old Grinch cartoon movie when he was sliding down the chimney. The feet get stuck and the body ends up bunching up, causing the person to be unable to breathe. Chimney sweep history is interesting in an absolutely horrifying way. This isn't the best source, but they talk about positional asphyxia, and they have an animation of the Grinch getting stuck in the chimney. Wow, fantastic write-up on a very troubling case. I remember when Josh's body was found, feeling like something about the story didn't make sense, and seeing the skepticism mirrored in comments on news stories about the discovery. But this is the most troubling bit of news yet to point to possible foul play. Andy sounds like a very dangerous man, and it's upsetting that he may be slipping through the cracks to prey on people again and escape justice for some pretty vicious crimes. But if the police work wasn't up to snuff, it's no surprise he's skating. I'm not sure who you could reach out to, except maybe any journalists local to where the body was found, especially those who initially reported on its discovery. Sometimes the only thing that spurs law enforcement to action is getting uncomfortable light shown on investigative shortcomings by a persistent reporter. Failing that, if you could find any family member with an online presence and reach out to them, they'd probably know which investigators seemed most sympathetic or willing to listen in the local PD who initially came to them with the body ID news. Long shots, I know, but I'm really scratching my head over this one. What I don't understand here is why the physical cause of death hasn't been mentioned. Did I miss a paragraph? I mean, was he stabbed? Did he suffocate? Was he drugged? Surely an autopsy was performed to whatever extent the decay allowed. A reply. Oh darn, sorry. I must have forgotten to include that. There were no signs of trauma such as stab wounds to the body. I think this is part of the reason that it was ruled as an accident of his own making. I could not find a toxicology report, but being that badly decayed, I'm not sure if there would be an accurate reading that would be possible to get. I went to school with Josh. He hung out with my best friend's brother. They were really close friends, which in turn meant we hung out with all those guys depending on whose house we were at. Josh was a really cool guy, and for everybody talking about how shitty the cops are in Woodland Park, then you are correct. They're pretty shitty. Anyway, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask me. I'm at work now, but I'm happy to answer anything I can, or even get my buddy on the phone to ask him since he was closer to Josh. I remember my friend's mom wrote to the newspaper and tried to talk to several people about it all, and nothing really came of it since it wasn't ruled as a murder. A reply said, "Do you know anything about his relationship with Andy?" Andy was fucking weird. Josh was just the type of person to hang out with anybody, so when they started hanging out, it was just Josh being a friendly guy. Relationship was only kids that went to the same school until they started hanging out shortly before this happened. I think Andy was into some heavy shit though. Josh was just a stoner as far as I knew. He could have done other/harder stuff and just kept it on the down low, but Andy liked to get way too messed up. I'm pretty sure he did meth. Hard to remember since it was a long time ago, you know? I don't think there was any rebar in the chimney. The Denver Post calls it rebar, but the owner, Mark Murphy, calls it, quote, webbing, unquote. I can see why a journalist might make that mistake. Steel webbing and rebar are both commonly used to reinforce concrete structures, but they're very different. Basically, webbing is made of steel wire that is much thinner and far more malleable than rebar is. Josh wouldn't fit through intact webbing, but I could easily see the webbing deteriorating to the point that the middle gives out. To be honest, I would probably expect that to happen if it were exposed to the elements in Colorado, which lines up with the fact that the cabin was supposedly full of raccoon shit. Also, the Reddit comment you quoted makes it sound like Josh was found upside down, but the coroner is quoted in the Denver Post saying that his feet were facing down and he was in the fetal position. I think that gels with the reports that his knees were above his head. He was a pretty thin guy, 6 foot tall and 150 pounds, so it doesn't surprise me that he could clutch his knees up that high. What's your theory on what happened to Joshua Maddux? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening. You can find the original post in Our Unresolved Mysteries through the link in the description box below. I like being able to listen to posts when I'm busy doing something else and can't read them, so I made this video for anyone who wants to listen to their Reddit posts. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and don't forget to hit the subscribe button below to get more puzzling mysteries.